Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first ever book club live with the spooky middle grade team. We are super thrilled to have our guest author with us today, Adrianna Cuevas. Welcome. We're going to get all to her book, The Total Eclipse of Nestor Lopez. But first, let's go around and just do some quick little intros about who is here. So Tanya, we'll head over to you first.
All right. Hi, I'm Tanya Del Rio, and I am the author of the War in the 13th series.
Yeah. And Josh.
Hi, I'm Josh Roberts. I'm the author of The Witches of Willow Cove, which came out earlier this summer, or I guess last summer now. Summer 2020.
It came out really recently. I'm Kim Ventrella, author of several books for young readers last year, Hello Future Me, and The Secret Life of Sam, that was chosen as one of Kirkus's best books of 2020. And let's head over to our moderator for tonight, Sarah Cannon. But before we go, I did want to just point out that if you are listening live, we will be taking your questions. So get those questions in the comments. And yes, so heading over to Sarah Cannon.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sarah Cannon, and I'm the author of Oddity and Twist. Twist came out this past February.
Awesome. So let's get started. We'll let Adrianna introduce herself as well. I guess we're like skipping over that. We're like, let's just get to the book. No, give us your introduction.
Okay, so I'm Adrianna Cuevas. I am the author of The Total Eclipse of Nestor Lopez. I'm also the author of, and this is my fake copy of Cuba in my pocket. You can see that the spine says The Total Eclipse of Nestor Lopez. So this is my homemade second book that will be coming out in September.
Wait, is that how I can just like get my second book published quickly? I just stick a new cover up?
Because my publisher's only doing e-arcs, but every time I do a school visit, you want to have something to show the kids and hold up. So I just printed my cover and slapped it on, and there we go.
Brilliant. I love it.
That's smart.
Yeah, in total support.
This might actually I don't even need to sell those anymore, right?
Yeah, because I don't know how to make digital mock-ups of my books worth a darn. So see, this solves that whole problem. I could just go analog.
There you go.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm like, it just solves the whole problem of having to like actually sell new books and get new book deals. I'm just gonna make my own now. I'm just gonna print out the cover. Like, here's my new book.
Solved publishing.
We've solved the problem. I love it.
This is why we're all so glad that Adrianna is here, because she just is a solution-oriented person. We're just lucky to be with her. She's also a newly minted Quota Bell Prey honor book winner, and so I'm so excited. I don't have a sticker on my copy.
I don't have one either, and I even made fake stickers too.
Again, the genius. But you will notice that I did go a little bit bananas with the Post-it flags, because this was a very fun read, and it was one of those experiences where I would start belly laughing, and someone downstairs would yell, "Are you okay?" And I'd be like, "Post-it flag." So I am ready to go. So thank you so much for being here and talking with us tonight. It's just exciting. So obviously people can put their burning questions in the chat. We really hope that you will. But we definitely brought questions of our own, because this is a really fun opportunity for us to kind of talk shop in a different way. Instead of doing school visits together, we get to just go enthuse over each other's books. So this is really fun. So one thing that I wanted to kind of kick off by asking you is just that I think really central to this story is how convincingly you write about being a kid with a military parent. And so I just wondered if that was something that you had personal experience with, or what inspired you to focus your story in that way.
So my dad was a college math professor, and my mom was a junior high science teacher. So no, I don't come from a military family in that sense, but I married a man in the military, and that's where I get my experience from. So I always show students this picture of my husband when he was deployed in Iraq. So like the first 4 years of our marriage, he had originally just joined the National Guard, but then September 11th happened, and that whole 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year thing went out the window, and everybody was active duty. So we did not see each other very much at all during that time. And so really all of the feelings in the book of Nestor being away from his dad and having to just communicate with him over letters and email, that's from my personal experience during that time. There's a part in the book where Nestor and his two friends are talking about how Nestor doesn't like military reunion videos, and that's directly from my own experience. Because what Nestor explains is that, you know, those surprise reunions, you never knew, like, am I going to the dentist or am I going to get surprised by dad? Am I going to go get ice cream with mom or am I going to get surprised by dad? And I felt like that the entire time my husband was gone. I was getting my master's degree at Missouri State University while he was deployed. And I would walk around campus, and I kid you not, I would like look around like, is he going to pop out anywhere at any minute? And like, that's emotionally exhausting. And so, yeah, I just kind of funneled all of that into the book. So even though I don't have that experience as a military family of moving a ton, I really drew on just how I felt while my husband was deployed. And then I had a friend who is a military mom. She read the first several chapters just to kind of check for me, like, am I hitting the right tone? And she said I was. So it was really valuable to me to get her input in that regard.
So that's really interesting that you haven't moved around a whole lot either, because actually I've never lived anywhere longer than 4 years. And so this book really spoke to me on that level as well. So that's interesting.
Yeah, I also moved around a lot growing up. So it was like, that really was so impactful. Like just the memory of like not wanting to make attachments to kids that you meet, or like starting over in a new school. Like that really hit home.
Yeah, that moment of Nestor admitting that he didn't like the assemblies for that reason was really resonated with me. It made me see those because you see those and they always seem so happy, and it really made me think of that in a different way. And the other moment that, so I listened to the audiobook version because that's how I love to consume middle grade fiction, and I actually gasped the moment when Nestor's mother thinks that the two military people are there, you know, for a terrible reason. And I, you know, was convinced as well in that moment. And it moved me. And, you know, I think you did such a good job of capturing just how fraught it is to be on the other side, to be the family of the military member. And it was so moving and really made me see it, you know, through different eyes, which is, you know, one of the great things about this story.
That scene, when I wrote it, I thought, you know, I feel like my agent or my editor is going to say, no, this is too ridiculous. It's unrealistic. Why would she possibly think that these kids that are selling popcorn for the ROTC are part of a mortuary affairs detail? And I was ready to tell them that actually happened to me. Of all the things in the book that are drawn like directly from my life, that one is the strongest. When my husband was deployed, I was living by myself in an apartment in a small town, and these kids came by and knocked on the door, and I didn't realize why I was having the reaction I was having at the time, but like I couldn't breathe and my heart was pounding. And I know that when I opened the door, I probably looked like a mad woman, and these kids were just like, hey, do you want to buy some popcorn? And I just remembered quickly saying no and shutting the door, and I lost it. And I realized then why I had the reaction that I did, because they were all in uniform. And so when I put that in the book, I thought, this just seems too ridiculous, but it was so indicative of that time of where you don't realize that you're not actually operating like you normally are, because you're just kind of in survival mode because you are just waiting for your family member to come back. So yeah, that was, I'm glad that resonated with you, because it was a bit of a bleeding on the page moment for me.
It was one of those moments where I realized consciously, more than subconsciously, like how much I was connecting with Nestor and his family and how emotionally invested I had become in their story.
Yeah, that hit me the same way for sure. I had that moment because it's not like he's deployed somewhere that's relatively peaceful. I mean, he's in a place where we know there's legitimate danger, and so I was 100% there in that moment and just convinced that that's what was happening. So really glad it wasn't.
Yeah.
So one thing that I loved so much about this book that I actually look for in middle grade fiction so much is that I love food and I love putting food in my books. And I always recognize a foodie author when I'm reading one and I'm like, oh, good, I'm going to get lots of this. And so there was just like a ton of deliciousness, like all throughout this book. And so I just was curious whether there's any chance that you would share a recipe at some point for one of the foods in the book so that we could all like take a shot at making it.
Well, I have on my YouTube channel, I have a video of my son and I making pastelitos de guayaba, guava pastries. So you can watch that and make them. But yeah, I always laugh. I was in an author group where we were all talking about our manuscripts and someone had commented like, oh my gosh, my characters have not eaten for like 10 chapters. And I could not relate at all because I was like, if my characters aren't eating or talking about food, talking about what they're gonna eat, like they're not doing anything, like they don't exist. Sometimes they eat too much probably, but I think it's just, that's such a big, I like to cook and I like to attempt new things. It's a big part of my life. Food is the way that I keep my culture alive. And so it's a big thing that I like to put in my books. But yeah, I'm already plotting like what recipe I want to share for Cuba in my pocket. Because I think for each book, I'll probably end up sharing a Cuban recipe.
I love that. I'm so different. Like I am not someone who bakes or cooks, but I have lots of food in my books too. Like, and it's all sugar, just like in my real life. Like they just eat like tubes of cookie dough, hot chocolate. They immediately go get ice cream after that. It's just like they don't even worry about. It's beautiful. One of the beautiful things about fiction, they can eat whatever they want and not feel guilty. I love it. We did have a question that came in from the chat. And that question was, what are some of your favorite tropes in middle grade fiction?
I think for me,
we'll have to mull that one over.
I think for me though, like, cause I've noticed this, I just turned my third book into my agent today. And the same thing keeps popping up now in all three of the books that I've written. And that's the idea of found family. Nestor kind of finds his family with Maria Carmen and Talib and the animals in New Haven. And then in my second book, Kumba, the main character, has to find a support system and a new family when he moves to Florida by himself until his family can join him. And then in my third book, the same thing happens. There's a really strong friend group that kind of acts like a family all together. So I think that's probably my favorite. Yeah, that's the one that I find I keep going back to.
Personally, I loved the enemies to friends trope, and I love that in Nestor. I just love that, like, you got this really mean bully kid, and then you think he's horrible, but then you kind of learn a little bit more about his situation, and then he kind of gets roped into helping the characters, and then they become friends, and I just love that. Like, that kind of side plot was really heartwarming to me.
I loved that too. I loved how, even though I'm familiar with that trope, I still didn't see it coming. I was still like, this Brandon kid is terrible. And then, of course, you did such a nice job of humanizing him and showing, kind of how and why he was sort of acting the way he was. And which is just it is a great middle grade trope, but you did such a good job, with the details of it, I think.
Yeah. And I really liked that kind of like military wannabe fan thing going on where he would have these little details that he said and Nestor was like totally inaccurate. Like, this kid, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Because it was illuminating to me, right? Like, it was revealing of Nestor's expertise as a military kid. And it had also never occurred to me how annoying that would be to like have a parent who's actually in danger and to have the military be so central to your life. And then to have other kids like marching around going raw and making these quasi-military comments that are just indicative of their lack of understanding of the actual gravity of the situation. So I had never seen that in a middle grade novel before. And I was like, oh, that's cool.
I got most of that from my husband because he has very strong opinions in that regard, as he should, being the one who actually was in the military. If I basically, I made him brainstorm with me like, okay, what's annoying? And then,
That's so funny because my husband started his career as a photojournalist, and I can't watch TV with him without him being like, they don't make that noise, that clicking, that hasn't happened for years, you know? So, yeah.
I love it. And we had another question that came through in the chat, and we haven't talked about kind of the spookier aspects of the book yet. So Miss Nikki wants to know, where do you get all your book ideas, and were you a spooky reader as a kid?
So I'll do the second one first of, was I a spooky book reader as a kid? Yes, absolutely. I usually hold up, but I can't find it now. I have no idea where it is. I have a copy of Edgar Allan Poe's short stories and poems that was printed in the 1980s, and it's illustrated. So everyone's hair is like beautifully feathered, and they all look like Stranger Things characters. But I was absolutely obsessed, probably more than was appropriate for a small child, with that book growing up. I loved it. And I still love horror. And so, yeah, I think that's why I'm pretty much a big fan of spooky books. Where I get my ideas from, I can probably attribute to the fact that I have a minuscule attention span and a super overactive imagination. So really, it never stops. So I might as well put it on paper. But I daydream a ton. I get distracted a ton. And so usually my ideas pop in that way. For Nestor, though, I actually, it's my son's fault that I wrote Nestor. He is the king of hypothetical questions and would always love to ask me, Mom, if you could have any superpower in the world, what would it be? Or Mom, if you could turn into any animal, what would it be? And so Nestor really was actually the result of him asking me, Mom, if you could have any power, what would it be? And he and I finally settled on being able to talk to animals, and it went from there.
That was one of my questions, actually. So awesome.
Yeah, I'm curious about those animals and the powers. Is the witch in the woods, is that based on a myth, or is that entirely the product of your imagination?
No, the witch, the Tule Vieja, is from Costa Rican and Panamanian folklore, but I had to make her appropriate for middle grade because the actual myth is this woman, if you're familiar with the La Llorona myth from Mexico and Central America, it's this woman who walks around and she's stealing children. Well, the Tule Vieja is kind of the same way, except she's walking around topless. She's got like bat wings and chicken feet and all of this, but I thought, this is for middle grade. Maybe we need to not have that. So I kind of changed her a little bit in that regard. But it was kind of fun to play around with that myth. I
mean, she was still plenty terrifying, even without the toplessness or the
exactly.
But like squad goals, because I don't think any of us in our spookiest dressing up have done like chicken feet or bat wings yet, like on us, So progress, like we always need new ideas around here.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So I loved the
Oh yeah, I love the bats.
Oh yeah, I figured the first person who's going to get to this in terms of actually doing it is you. Am I right?
Kim's going to do it.
I already have my bat hat. So I'm close.
Oh, I haven't seen that one before.
Yes. That's on it.
Excellent. You're ready for a spooky Western,
Continue.
I feel like.
I am ready. Yes, I am ready to become the witch in the woods, basically.
See, but I don't know. I probably wouldn't be as freaked out if you were the witch of the woods. But I also don't feel like you would be trying to kill animals. You might be trying to unleash them on someone. But now see.
Oh yeah, I would never harm the animals, like guarantee. I'm the person who like 100 people get murdered by the serial killer in the horror movie. And I'm like, okay, then the dog, they go after the dog. I'm like, You cannot go after the dog. Yeah, that's me. So I would not be going after the animals, guaranteed.
Yeah,
Well,
I don't
you may
want
have to
to
wait for
spoil
that.
anything for those who haven't read the book, but I was definitely pleased with the resolution of the missing animals.
Same. I was
Yeah.
definitely very concerned for those animals, and I was just like, please, please let the animals die. Like,
Yeah.
And I have a strange attachment to George, even though George is never really
Yes,
seen.
I
was like,
know.
I like George.
I know, because I just think of George as my dog. Like every dog is my dog, and I'm like, don't you hurt George.
Yeah, I spent like
actually-
70% of the book wanting to know where George was, how George was. Yeah.
The reason that dog's name is George is that my grandfather had a dog named George when he was living with us when I was growing up. So when I had to think of dogs' names, I was like, oh, just name it George. I'm like, that was kind of a weird dog name for it to have, but okay.
You know, if anything, my flash drive is named George. I was just using it for this, and it's named George.
Now, see,
Funny.
I never even thought of naming my flash drive something. This opens up new possibilities. Yeah, the only thing I was disappointed by was that Nestor didn't actually bite anybody. Like I was waiting, I was like, oh, no, I would want to. So I was like, that's a missed opportunity, maybe, just like a tiny bit. And Kim, you're gonna have to fight somebody for that hat because I already see it in the comments, man. Like somebody's coming for it.
I know. I mean, because bats are kind of like my thing anyway. So when I found that hat, I was like, oh boy, this is happening. So exciting.
So the journal entries were really cool. That were like all of these little, like naturalist entries about like groundhog, like prairie dogs being really annoying, right? Or like different. That was really fun. So like, did you just like sit and make a list of weird animal qualities, or was this stuff you had directly observed? Like, did you ever hear an albatross snore or?
No, I just tried to like, because like I show the students when we do visits that my son would always read this massive, animal encyclopedia. So I kind of enlisted him to help me find like all the really cool facts. Like he was insistent about the turkey vulture vomiting and pooping on itself as a defense mechanism that had to make it in the book. So I try to just like take real facts as my basis and then try to think, well, but if you could actually hear what the animals were thinking, based on this fact, what would they be saying? And so that was actually a lot of fun. So that's why like the albatross is snoring and going 5 more minutes, mom. And the lice that Nestor gets in his head are like all talking at the same time. And it would be super annoying. So that part was actually super fun because you just kind of get to let your brain go haywire, which I'm pretty good at. So
yeah, I like the part where Maria
I love how all the animals
axolotl is like gaslighting everybody about food.
Yes.
Like,
Oh yeah.
That might be attached to the fact that my son has an axolotl that he always forgets to feed.
I knew it, man. I knew it. I was going to ask you how many pets.
Yes.
Yeah, or does he? Maybe it's living large and none of us knows.
Maybe so. I love how snarky they are and how all the animals sound like snarky 12-year-olds. They're like so annoyed by everything. It's hilarious. Yeah, of course, especially the pooping raven. Wait, raven or crow? Anyway,
Raven,
the pooping
yeah.
raven is my
Yes, get ready for some white lightning.
yes, yeah, that was the best line.
Yeah. And I think one of the great middle grade lines of all time is, "I can't wait to go poop on a witch."
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of us can relate to that sentiment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, that was like students always ask, like I've had students ask, do you ever put yourself as a character in your book and whatever? And I think when I was writing the animals, that's when I was letting myself like not edit my own voice the most. Like that was everything I wanted to say and come across in the book is through the animals. Like everywhere else I was trying to be very measured and like show everyone's character. But with the animals, it was like, nope, here we go.
Well, I feel like that works because animals wouldn't have a filter anyway.
No.
They're so wild, so it just.
Yup. Oh, that was a creepy moment when it was like, "Where's the witch?" And they were like, "She's everywhere." Like, it's like, ooh, And I thought, yeah, from an animal's perspective, like, it is a mood. Pooping on witches is a total mood. I agree. I also really like Nestor's shade about what a small town New Haven is. I lived up by the panhandle of Oklahoma at one point, and like our big fun thing was to go to the peanut plant in the next town over and get like a huge bucket of peanuts. So I felt mildly attacked, but also I totally got it. And I love the name New Haven. I thought it was like a very clever, given what that town was supposed to represent to them when they moved there. So, like, would you describe yourself as more of a small town person or a big city person?
Well, so I might need to edit my previous statement about how I let my own voice come out through the animals. I did a little bit of venting when I talked about small towns through Nestor, I'm realizing now. So I grew up in Miami, Florida, but I went to a very small town for college. And then when I got married, I moved to an even smaller town in the Midwest. And I realized that that's not for me. I'm not a small town person by any stretch of the imagination. And so when Nestor is kind of being snarky about that and making comments, let's just say that was my catharsis for having lived in a small town for like 15 years.
I love when you can do that in writing. Like you kind of can use it as an outlet for something in your real life. That's always super fun.
I was more surprised by ice cream at a pharmacy. I had not heard of this.
Yeah.
That's the thing, I guess. So yeah, I was like, wow, I would not expect to get ice cream at a pharmacy. That's pretty cool little detail there for small towns.
Nestor also did not expect that. He's like, wow. One of the things that I loved about the book was how the mystery unfolded. Sort of a slow burn, and you're not really sure what's in the woods or if maybe Abuela is actually responsible in some way. And so I loved how you kind of laid out the clues and waited until about the midpoint to really reveal the stakes of what was going on. And I was curious as to whether or not you had always intended to set it up as a mystery or whether that developed. And I guess the larger question here is, are you a plotter or are you more a pantser?
So the plot unfolded and then I had to refold it because when I originally wrote the book, Sarah, your comment about naming the town New Haven, the way the book was originally written, when Nestor moves to the town, he actually discovers that the residents of New Haven can turn into animals. And so there was a lot more fantasy. But when I submitted that version to my agent, she said, you know what, let's scale the fantasy back and just have it be where he can talk to animals and there's a witch. So it's a little bit of a tighter story. And I am super glad that she suggested that. I had to rewrite from scratch the last 2/3 of the book because, it was just a minor thread in the beginning of like, okay, they're not going to turn into animals, but then it, snowballs as it tends to do. But I'm so happy with how it turned out. And I think it's a much better story than I originally had. But the town was called New Haven because it was a safe place for all these people that could turn into animals. And so when I took that out, I was like, well, I'll just leave it as New Haven because I'm already changing everything else. And that's one less thing. So I think for me, though, I'm a plotzer, a plantser, whatever you would call a hybrid of those two things. Because typically, if I can get like maybe broadly outlined, like the first 2/3, I'll go ahead and start writing. I don't know if it's you, Kim, or if it's Samantha that says she always writes like the last chapter first and then gets started. Like, I just like to be surprised. Like, oh, this is how it's ending. Yay, okay, let's go with it.
I don't write the ending first, but I will say I do always generally know how it's going to end, I'm right toward that. But I just love the part when you were talking about your editorial process, because I love to hear another author who will like go in, you've sold the book, and then you end up completely like rewriting it basically because you take like I do so many big revisions, and not everybody kind of does that as part of their process. But I'm one of those people who generally in my process is going to do that. So like maybe I'll rewrite it from scratch or like almost from scratch at some point, because you have those threads and you have to see how they play out before you know if there's maybe a better way that you could write it. So
I'm
glad
that I had to do that with my first book, because I've noticed now in my subsequent books that I've written, I'm not afraid to make big changes because I already did it once and it didn't kill me. And so like I feel like I'm a lot more ambitious when I'm revising. And so I really like that that I had to do that in the beginning with Nestor.
Yeah. That was a huge fear as like a little baby author, was like, no. It took me a long time to get all these words down on paper. Like they're staying. But yeah, and I don't know. Like I don't know about the rest of you, but even when I completely throw something over my shoulder, I always feel like it informs whatever I do next. Like I don't necessarily feel like it was wasted effort. But like it's a lot less intimidating than it was.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I do feel a little bit of the wasted effort. Yeah. I'm sort of like, well, what if I just move this comma? Does that fix it? Is that the problem, really?
Well, my son read the version where the residents were turning into animals before I completely changed it. So it was very fun for him to read the final version of the book because he got to see like what little threads survived. Like the scene with Miss Humala, where it looks like she's about to spit on Nestor's work, and like it's because in the original version of the book she turned into a llama, and so I just kept that description of her body language because I felt like it. But my son was like, I know why she's doing that.
That's amazing.
That's amazing. See, we get all our deep cuts here, our behind the scenes stuff. That's amazing. So Amparo just said,
I love that. Like. Okay.
Did you see the comment that just came in that refolding plots is such a flex?
Yeah.
My pun heart is happy now. Kim, was there something else that you wanted to say?
No, I was going to say it is always funny to see those kind of things that linger from the previous versions and you just keep them, because I always do that too, and it's interesting to look back and try to even pick out like, okay, where did this come from? I don't know, but it's amazing. Like, so yeah, it's kind of fun when it works out that way.
So I also just really yay puns. Yes, indeed, yay puns. I really enjoy some of the analogies that you make in your writing. And so, we had kind of talked ahead of time about, did we have any favorite passages and so there's this moment, and it's on page 155. I think the quote is, Abuela holds out her arms and I let her wrap me in a field of daisies, my sobs flooding their petals. And, of course she was wearing this daisy house coat. And I remember noticing that earlier because I was like, ooh, flowers. I like flowers, But I just thought that imagery was so beautiful. And so I guess like my question is, what kind of comparisons do you like to have your middle grade characters notice? Because that was obviously something that was seen through Nestor's eyes and filtered through his lens,
I think for me, it's just because I like to play around with language. And I'm a bit of a language nerd. That's what my master's degree is in. But so for me, it's more like, how can I say this a different way? Am I even saying it in English? Sometimes will come up for those of us who are bilingual. You kind of get a syntax, perhaps arrangement from another language. And so I think for me, though, I just like kind of like what you said, like, how would this character describe it? Because I think sometimes when we're making these analogies or we're being writers, it doesn't fit, especially since this is a story told in first person. Yeah. I knew that I didn't want to get very overly descriptive or just very complex, because this is a boy who's in, 5th, 6th grade, and I know how they talk, and it's not with tons of eloquent analogies. So it was fun to think of, well, how would this character speak in an engaging and fun way that'll draw in readers, but at the same time stay true to who he is as a character. So it was really kind of fun to go back and forth between those. But I think the most fun I tend to have with language is, if I'm describing bodily functions and things like, I like to find humorous examples for my descriptive language, which is funny since you picked one of the more emotional ones that I ended up writing.
It was this moment of rightness, like where you go, oh, that person.
I did realize, though, in my first version of writing that scene, I had never mentioned what Abuela was wearing. So I was like, no, they're going to get to the end and be like, what's happening? And so I had to make sure I went back and made it really obvious she was wearing like this bata de casa, this house coat that had flowers on it.
Cool. One thing I really loved about some of your chapter openings were the letters that Nestor wrote to his dad. And especially, I think it was chapter 19 or 18, he's writing, and like he's always be positive, his thing that he's got to do, like put on this brave front and like everything's good. And I thought that was really impactful because like I remember being a kid and just trying really hard to be like, everything's okay, and like not to worry the adults around me. But I love that there was this alternate text in between some of his passages where he's like telling his dad what he wants to present to his dad, but then like he's also kind of confiding in his interior voice of what's actually going on. And I really like that. Like it really resonated with me, like that kind of need to put up this front that isn't quite what's going on.
Yeah, because I feel like that happens a lot to kids that age, where there's what they want to tell us and then there's what they end up actually telling us. And so I wanted to show that. And I thought, well, I mean, that would be even compounded even more so if the parent that you were wanting to talk to wasn't even there, And so, yeah, I liked the way they kind of did the font and everything to do the alternating thoughts that he had. I thought it ended up looking pretty good, but it was really important to me to kind of highlight that because I think so many kids deal with wanting to express themselves, but then only letting that surface stuff come out because they feel like, oh, well, I'm just everything's supposed to be fine. I'm supposed to be able to handle everything. And so we just kind of get this surface fake persona almost.
Yeah, that was an interesting thing about their relationship with their science teacher too, because in some ways she was a sympathetic character, in some ways she was a supportive character. But again, like that mystery leaves that relationship kind of dubious and unresolved. And so like that was really interesting as well.
She was originally the villain in the first version. She was the Tule Vieja. But when I changed it, yeah, I changed it and decided to have it be where it was her mom.
Well, I thought that was kind of a good fake out because when I read it, I was like totally expecting her to be the villain. And then you realize that she's also being tormented and you're like, oh my God, like what is going on? Like, so that was a really great, like kind of little twist.
It makes me feel better about suspecting her, because I thought like, oh, Adrianna just totally fooled me. But maybe I was just, understanding the subtext of your original draft.
It was more, I almost think I lucked into a lot of that because I wrote, that original version that ended up not surviving, but then I had enough little tidbits of that previous one that it kind of enriched my final version.
Yeah.
So sometimes, when you do completely rewrite, and I felt like I ended up with a more robust plot than I actually had before, even though I ended up completely redoing it.
Yeah, that's me too. It's always a process of layering. Like each version you're doing is just, like you said, it's more robust and more complex and you can build on it each time. But I was thinking of when Tanya was talking about the letters, which are one of my favorite things too. I was thinking of the whole thing about him being told that he has to be like the man of the house now, and just that kind of whole strange dynamic and the pressure that it puts on him too, like to feel like, okay, he's, told this first in like second grade or whatever, and now he feels like he has to be this like adult figure. I mean, I love that. Was a very interesting part of the story.
Yeah, I would, especially and honestly for a Latinx kid who at least for boys in Latinx families, they're always the babies. So to be told by your dad you're the man of the house when you're like 12 is actually really not common, because usually you're the baby for a long time, pretty much until you die. So
but it's so interesting with all the layering that you're talking about, because it actually introduced this really interesting echo, because you've got his teacher, and then she's got to figure out what her responsibilities are and are not in relation to the actual Tula Vieja. And then, at the beginning, we kind of thought that his abuela might be involved somehow. And so, like, one of the things I kept asking myself in that moment was, what's he going to do if she is, So I think it's really cool how that worked out.
Well, and I liked that Nestor and Miss Humala actually have more in common with each other than he realizes, because she got drug all around the world by her mother chasing these eclipses so that she could gain more power. And, Nestor is being drug everywhere because of his dad's job. And so I kind of like making super creepy evil villains, but I also like making them somewhat sympathetic, or characters that you think are bad, making them sympathetic, like Brandon. And so that was just it was fun to play around with that.
I had a question. Well, this is kind of like a conspiracy theory, I guess, I don't want to give away too many spoilers, but so at one point you think that maybe the Tula Vieja is going to steal Nestor's ability to talk to animals. And I was like, well, then how did his abuela get that ability in the first place? Did she steal it at some point? And now it's been passed. I'm like, what was the origin of that ability if it was going to be stolen by the villain? Where did it come from? I'm not expecting you to know. I'm just that's my conspiracy theory about maybe where it came from.
No, it's awesome. I love getting questions like that, because then you realize when you were researching and outlining your book, the things that you completely didn't bother coming up with. I'm pretty sure Nestor's mom doesn't have a first name. But I do that. But that's one of those things where I'm like, they can talk to animals because they can. Surprise!
I don't think you need to explain it, but I feel that's, first of all, that's the type of questions kids always want to know. They always, they have the coolest theories. There was a theory, and I won't go into it, but that the little sister in my book was a mermaid, and there are no mermaids in this book. There's no mention of mermaids, but I had several people ask me, was she secretly a mermaid? And I don't know where that came from, but so I feel kids are going to be asking you that for sure.
They're not in the ocean.
I just loved the expression on Adrianna's face as the question was unfolding, and it was mind blown. But now you have what you need for the prequel. The history of where this came from.
But I love that as an author, you can do your world building and you can set everything in place. And I think this is why we have fan fiction. Readers are still going to take bits and fill in all the holes for you. And that's awesome. Yeah. Or just take the story and run with it. I've had kids who ask if there's going to be a sequel, and there's not. But I'm always encouraging them, but you can write. I mean, go for it. Write something.
Well, yeah, but you don't know how much I'm geeking out, because when you're talking about your next book, when Abuela was kind of upbraiding him a little bit for the fact that he was oh, I'm going through a thing. And she was oh, you're going through a thing. Let me remind you what my thing was. I was I want to read that. I want to read the story of her coming from Cuba without her family and having to be here alone, And so I feel you've gifted us that with your mock arc. We're going to get that book anyway. I'm so excited.
Well, and that was actually the start of me writing my second book, was writing Abuela's story. When I wrote that scene where she's telling him about her experience and what it was like, I thought, that is a book. And so I sat down with my dad and we talked, and I decided, I really want to do this. So yeah, that whole conversation with Abuela really is what led me to write the Cuba in My Pocket. So it's kind of a Nestor sequel, but not.
So cool. That's really cool. I love that. I love when you can see those connections in your own books, but nobody else would necessarily know, but they're there. That's cool. I do want to remind people to get their questions into the chat as we kind of wind down. But I also wanted to ask, because you posted something on Twitter, I think it was earlier today, about a book that you're working on and kind of like the working title. So I was wondering if you could share that with us.
Yeah, and we can, like I said, brainstorm a better title. So I realized like the file name has a silly title and I don't really like it, but I realized that like on the cover page in all caps, huge letters, it says El Peito Mal Tirado by Adrianna Cuevas, which translates to A Poorly Laid Fart by Adrianna Cuevas. And that has like absolutely nothing to do with the book. But I suck at titles. I've always sucked at titles. I hate titling things. If I could call this one book 3, I'd call it book 3. But yeah.
I mean, aren't all first drafts really this?
Poorly made.
Yes.
Well, and I love it because like the phrase in Spanish, like it has some imagery to it because it's literally like a poorly thrown fart. And I feel like I was just throwing my book at my agent, and it might be a massive fart. It might not. We hope it's okay.
Oh my gosh. I mean, let's just be honest. There are an awful lot of middle grade kids out there that title would be a spelling.
Yes.
Yeah. That's what I said. That's where the magic happens in the publishing industry. Sometimes
my husband was like, "You can't call it that."
I know there's a lot of adults that would buy that book. I mean, I'm just saying. Well, and we did have a question from Peggy. I know you kind of mentioned that you're not necessarily planning a sequel to Nestor, but can you give us any details on maybe this book you're working on now, or if there's anything that we might see from Nestor in the future?
Well, the book that I turned in today is about 3 kids who one of the main character, Mari, she lives in the Gulf Coast of Texas, and her family for New Year's Eve, the tradition is to burn effigies to get rid of bad luck. So they will always sews these dolls and they toss them in this fire on New Year's Eve. Well, Mari decides that that's embarrassing. Like her family's just different and she doesn't want to do that. And so she doesn't burn the effigy. She keeps it. And by doing that, she's cursed by El Cocodrillo with bad luck. And so it's all this huge mess of her trying to get rid of her bad luck because her 2 friends get roped in to the bad luck because they touch the effigy as well. And it was a lot of fun to write because this is going to sound bad, but we always talk as authors about torturing our characters. And like, I had a lot of fun making these kids miserable because everything that could go wrong does go wrong for them. And it was glorious. But my agent, who is not a horror fan, I sent her the manuscript and it took her a long time to read. And I was kind of wondering, and she said it's because she would have to read a little bit and put it aside and read a little bit more and put it aside because it was too scary for her. Because I had fun again making this evil El Cocodrillo character just as vicious and terrible as possible and scaring the kids. And so it's probably the most horror, I guess, filled book that I've written, and I had a lot of, it was delightful.
I want to read it. Usually mine is like, my editor's like, I had to put it down because I was sobbing. Like, I do sad, but I want to read scary. Scary is what I want to read.
For sure. This is the scary squad for sure. So I got to ask you how much I love this moment where like Nestor's house is trashed. No one knows where his abuela is. And Talib is helping him pack. And you wrote, he even remembers to include underwear. And I was like, that's a friend. Because like reminding 12-year-old boys to actually like freaking wear underwear or wear clean underwear or like I know it was work to remember to do this. Okay. So like I found that to be a very tender moment. And so I just wonder what you think are the most important qualities to show in middle grade friendships.
Well, I had him do that because the book opens with Nestor bragging about what an amazing, packer and unpacker he is, but he forgets to pack underwear. And so I thought, I'm going to give him a friend that can do the things for him that he clearly cannot do himself. And so I I just love the idea, because I've seen this in my son's friendships and then friendships that I had, of you don't have to ask. You don't even have to ask for help, and you don't even have to tell what you need. And your friends just know, and they know what to do for you, and they know how to support you and help you. And I think sometimes with the boy characters, it comes across more in actions rather than it does with words. Instead of comforting him and, oh, Nestor, it's going to be okay, it's stop. You're trying to put a soccer ball in a suitcase. Let's take that out and actually put in what you need. You know, he's doing for him what he needs done without him having to ask. And I think I always love seeing that, because it shows that your friends have been paying attention to you and they care about you, and they're sensitive to those parts of you. And so I like that. To me, that's Talib. He watches and he notices how people are and what they're lacking and what he could do for them.
I loved, you know, the beginning of their friendship, the moment when Nestor just sort of makes sure that the peas stop hitting Talib, you know, for that Brandon is flinging. And that, again, is just sort of like, it's not one of those like flashy moments, but it is, you know, it is an action. It's just Nestor kind of keeping in character and being himself, but it does lay the foundation for this sort of mutual kindness between the two of them. And they have this great relationship where there's a lot of banter and there's a lot of sort of teasing each other in a playful way, but you can tell pretty early on they're both good kids and they care for each other. And I love the trio, how that trio develops, and the friendships that they have.
Mm-hmm. I think I'm kind of stuck on writing trios of friends. Like, I realized there's a trio friendship in Cuba in My Pocket, and there's a trio friendship in the manuscript I turned in. And it's just always fun to do that interplay, because you can get different personalities and how they interact. So yeah, I think I might have to expand at some point, but I don't know. I usually don't have the attention span for like large casts of characters.
I liked how Maria Carmen's mom was just like so preferential toward Talib and so suspicious of Nestor. It gave me Among Us vibes, right? Nestor was sus, and we all knew totally it. And Talib was gonna get all the churros because he was a good boy and he was definitely not like witch affiliated. And that cracked me up.
She definitely had like no filter. Like, she wasn't going to pretend at all.
Which I thought that was funny. You're so used to like parents being like nice to everybody, even though like when you had, like, I know I had friends that were probably brats, and my parents still were very polite with them, and like, so it's kind of refreshing to see an adult just be like, no, not into this.
Yeah,
and Nestor's mom wasn't exactly like, she was pretty great, but man, she was bad at taking pictures.
I know, every time that happened, they're like, oh, and the forehead's missing. It's such a human trait.
That might be based on experience as a short person with short arms. It was not hard for me to come up with those scenes.
My sister, yes.
Yeah, I've been informed by my kids that I'm a bad selfie taker. They're like, you do this weird thing with your eyebrows? And I'll be like, try not to do it. And they're like, you're doing it even more.
I was waiting for her to like solve the mystery. I was waiting for him to look at one of her pictures and have her completely have missed the shot, but for there to be something in the background that was really important.
That's a good idea. I liked writing her though, because it's the trope, I guess, that we always kind of deal with in middle grade. I was having to explain this to family members who don't read middle grade and like aren't writers, so they didn't quite understand that you have to find a way to make the parents disappear so that the kids can learn to be independent and learn to solve things on their own. That's why the mom, like, all of a sudden randomly has a nursing conference. Yeah. Like, I knew I had to get rid of her somehow. And so, yeah, I always love looking at reading different middle grades and seeing how various authors solve that issue of making the parents like not be on the page and not be involved as much as at least looking at how I interact with my son, as much as they would normally be involved in their life. Like Nestor's off on his own a lot more than I would ever allow my own child to be.
Yeah.
Well, I really loved it at the end too, when Brandon's dad like shows up and then he's like, what can I do? And that's like, can you just take care of my abuela? And he's like, okay, kids, like you take care of the witch, I'll take care of this. And I love that because like, I mean, I don't know in real life if an adult would be like, go ahead, children,
Go for it.
You know, but I love that. And it kind of reminded me actually of like Miyazaki films where like the children have so much agency and the adults like are really trusting of the children in that. And I think that's something you don't actually see a lot in American or even like Western literature, because I feel like there is this sort of overprotectiveness that parents have. And so I kind of love that you just like, go do your thing. Like, I've got this. That was really awesome.
Yeah, because that was the other thing that I had to solve. I was like, okay, well, they are going to go rescue Abuela and the dad, but then I need them to disappear because I want them, you know, to be in charge of the climax of the story. So yeah, I think it's always a balance and a kind of play as an author to figure out how to achieve that, where your main characters, the kids, can really shine and be on their own and be independent.
It's funny as an author reading another author's work and kind of recognizing the structure of like, okay, so now I know where we are in the story. And then all of a sudden the mom has the nursing conference. I'm like, okay, all right, I know
There it is.
I know what part of the story we're in. But it is, you know, again, as with so many things, it comes down to the details and how you kind of work it in, which, you know, I think was so skillful.
Yeah, that reminded me of Phyllis Reynolds Naylor's Witch series. Did you ever read that? Like Witchwater and the Witch's Sister, and those were terrifying. And and there were animals, but they were like evil animals being sicked on you by the witch, and like crows coming down your chimney while you were trying to have a sleepover with your friend because you were freaked out because your parents were out of town. So
nice.
Yeah, right? See, that's why I love this group. Nice.
I know, I'm like, yes, I would love as well. I also love how, I mean, you kind of got the parents out of the way in a sense through, like, you know, she's taking the selfies and she's trying to present this always positive view. So Nestor feels like he has to maintain that for her. Like, he has to maintain this facade of always being positive about everything. So he's not going to present these problems to her. And that explains like why he never like asks her for help, because he just doesn't want to stress her out. And I just like that dynamic of how you put that weight on his shoulders, because a lot of kids feel like that in real life, whether it's not like a witch in the woods, but maybe it's like they don't want to share their real life issues with their parents for that same reason. Like, they're almost trying to protect the parents. And so I like that dynamic that you put into.
Yeah. And Nestor has a really great combination of sort of like maturity for his age, but also, you know, you can tell he's still a kid. He's got that sense of humor. He's got that kind of a relationship with Talib. But there is this, you know, as you said before about the, like, you know, you're the man of the house now sort of moments, there is this forced responsibility on him. And also, I think because of who he is, he kind of takes the personality or takes the responsibility on himself as well to protect those around him. So he's always talking about how am I going to explain this, or I can't explain this, or I need to protect my mom from, you know, finding out about this. And it's so true to the character, but it's interesting because I think there are a lot of kids who are forced to become a little more mature a little earlier than is probably ideal. And Nestor handles that so well.
Well, I think for him, especially being a military kid, where he might be, you know, he's reluctant to form relationships because he assumes they're just going to move, but when he sees a problem happening in this town that he honestly is just kind of biding his time in, he gets invested right away. And I think that's why I had the abuela come under suspicion first, because I had to give Nestor a strong reason to really care about this problem. Because if there was a witch in the woods terrorizing animals, well, he's going to move in a few months probably. So who cares? So I really had to make sure there was a reason for him to care about solving this problem. And I tried to do that with having the abuela fall under suspicion. But I think too, that thread though is already there, given that his dad has kind of placed upon him, you know, this responsibility and being the man and everything. So he probably felt like even without abuela, well, there's there's an issue here and I feel like I can do something about it. So according to my dad, I should do something about it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Yeah, like with the traps. With the traps hit me that way real strongly too, because that's my oldest. That's exactly how his head would work. Like, these traps should not be here. Therefore, they're not going to be here. And it doesn't actually matter if it's my job to do something about them or not. It's my job now. So I thought that was really, I mean, we homeschool, and one of his like phys ed things that he set up for himself was going and pulling trash out of the local creek. Like, he just put on his waders and go do it. So that, like, and when they got through that kind of clever idea to just pull the springs out of the traps and then they wouldn't work anymore. I thought that was genius.
That I thank my husband for that, because I don't know anything about that sort of thing, but he worked for the Missouri Department of Conservation and the Texas Department of Conservation as a volunteer, and so he learned a lot of that stuff. So I attribute a lot of the facts in my book to me basically pestering my husband and making him tell me about things.
Well, we love him. Tell him that we're so grateful.
One of the things that I love about the fact that Nestor's grandmother lives in this town, and because you can imagine a future where they have to move again, but he has roots in this town, and so you can also imagine a future where he has moved, but he gets to come back to visit, or maybe he gets to spend the summer, and you can imagine the future adventures that the trio or the quad group could have, without it being sort of overdone, or like sort of a fake ending where like, oh, you don't have to move anymore, Nestor. Like, no, like probably that's still going to happen, but he does have roots there now, and so it is, as much as he can have a home, home is there where his grandmother and his friends are that he can always come back to. So I really appreciated that.
Yeah.
I liked I knew that I wanted the ending to be ambiguous in the sense that you're referring to of, I'm not going to flat out say whether or not he has to move or not. I knew from the very beginning, I did not want his dad coming back in the story, because I had already made this big deal about not liking military family reunions. So I wasn't going to put one on the page. And so, but I wanted it to be a little bit more ambiguous. One, because I want to encourage my readers to think beyond the story. I think that's a good skill for young readers to develop. And so I knew that I wanted to leave it a little bit open to interpretation, but I love your idea, Josh. I do like the sense that he's put down roots. His dad scrawled his name in the back of the closet, and I can see Nestor doing that too, if he has to move again, and putting his name there as well, and probably correcting his dad's drawing that he made and making it better.
Yeah, I loved how restrained the ending was, and how there was that tension though, because I felt like it's like a celebration kind of at the end. And so you got the sense, is the dad going to pop in? It's like that type of event. And especially when she's like, there's something inside the house for you, I'm like, what? So I like how you kind of hinted that tension though, but then you like, don't go there. Like for me, that's the perfect ending where you leave some stuff unresolved, but clearly like he's changed like throughout the story, and we can see that he's changed the way that he's interacting with this place and these people, and he's more open to these friendships and whatnot. So I love that type of ending.
Yeah.
I did. So well, before we like get to any like serious finishing up things, I did want to get in our question that is kind of a tradition from Miss Nikki that she asks at the end of like every interview or anything that I've ever been a part of. And
I'm so nervous.
Part of the tradition is that it is unrelated to anything. And the question is, what is your favorite reality show? And I can tell you, Miss Nikki likes this thing called 90 Day Fiance that I have never watched and will never watch, but that is her favorite.
That sounds horrific.
Does that mean you only have to have a fiance for 90 days, or does that mean you have to get one within 90 days?
See, that would, maybe the first one would be better, but no.
Both sound terrible.
Miss Nikki's laughing
Not
at that.
if it's a murder mystery.
Well,
I do actually have a favorite reality TV show, and I don't know if Amparo is still watching, but if she is, she could probably say what my favorite reality TV show is. So Amparo, that's been popping in, is the author of Blaze Wrath Games. And she is my K-pop hermana. We watch all of the BTS concerts together, and we text each other just random funny pictures of K-pop idols and all of that. So there is a K-pop group that actually has their own reality show called Run BTS, and it's on every Tuesday morning, and you can watch it.
Okay, excellent. Well, we have learned something new about you tonight. I love it. We also had one more question from Miss Nikki that was actually for Sarah. And I just wanted to say before we kind of end that our next read is actually going to be Twist by Sarah Cannon. So we will save any questions for Sarah until next time. And we don't have a date yet, but that will be around the end of March. And also, apparently, Josh, you have a doppelganger on 90 Day Fiancé. So just look into that.
All right, I'm gonna have to do some research on this.
Yeah.
90 Day
We'll have to do
Fiancé.
like a
I
group
hope
watch
he's not
now.
like a reality show villain.
Oh, that would be even better. Come on, you're a spooky author. Like, don't you want to be the doppelganger of a villain? Yeah.
I guess
think
it
this is a
depends
group
what's on
watch
the villain.
I love it. Well, Sarah, did you have any like closing questions or remarks for us?
I think Adrianna has been so cool about being in the hot seat, about it not just being a book
It's
discussion group.
terrifying.
You know, like there will be months where we're doing a book discussion group and the author is not here, y'all. So of course our inaugural one, like she's right in the hot seat and we all want to talk to her because we're all so excited. So thank you for being so accommodating and fun and chill with us. I just appreciate it a lot.
I had to think about things in my book that had never occurred to me. So
Yeah, now I'm realizing the parents never need first names because what kid cares? Like no kid.
Oh, they do care because I get that question all the time. What were
Do you
their
really?
first? Yes, I get questions like that all the time. And I'm like, I feel so weird saying it. But I'm like, can I get back to you?
I gotta make it up.
Like, let me make one up real quick.
We got to talk about this mermaid thing later because I want to know. Like, I got to hear all about the mermaid theory.
That was the
Yes.
coolest. I will say, yeah, I will tell y'all at some point later because that was the coolest theory I have ever heard. Like, what a cool person to even come up with that. Like, yeah, I love it. But, but I will echo. Thank so much to Adrianna and to everyone who joined us for our first book club live. Everyone who joined us out in the audience as well, and definitely, check Spooky Middle Grade. Check us out on Twitter and Instagram because we will announce the date for our next read when we'll be discussing Twist by Sarah Cannon. But thanks so much, everyone, for joining us tonight. Go watch that BTS show that we've all Okay. Good night, everyone.
Right.
Bye.
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 Sorry, I'm trying to play this video.